Hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Kiara Profena. Together we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today we're talking about one of the oldest search and rescue institutions in Oregon.
That's right. If, God forbid, you get injured like climbing Mount Hood, or you get lost hiking in the gorge, there's a good chance that the people coming to help you will be part of the Crag Rats. This nonprofit volunteer organization has been around since the 1920s, which is kind of wild, and this year the Crag Rats are celebrating their 100th birthday.
That's right. And here to talk with us about the organization is Christopher Van Tilburg, who's a mountain rescue doctor with the Crag Rats and author of a new book about the organization, Crisis on Mount Hood, Stories from 100 Years of Mountain Rescue. Christopher, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So just to get started here, what exactly are the Crag Rats for people who may be unfamiliar with this organization?
The Hood River Crag Rats are a all-volunteer mountain rescue team based in Hood River, Oregon, and we are the county's primary search and rescue team. And we were established in 1926 and have been volunteering for 100 years.
Wow. What is I know you're based in Hood River, so what is the geographical scope of your rescue missions?
Well, we love doing this so much that we go anywhere somebody asks us to, if we have the ability. So typically our home base is Hood River County, and regularly we help Clackamas, Multnomah, Wasco, Skamania, and Klickitat counties in missions. And in the last several years, we've gone up to Mount Rainier National Park and Olympic National Park to help on big missions. And so if we have the ability, we'll go as far as we can within reason, but mainly we stick to Hood River County and the counties around Mount Hood.
And Christopher, how long have you been with the Crag Rats? How'd you get involved?
Well, I'm a medical doctor by training, and I was, in the early days of my training 30 years ago, I got very interested in wilderness medicine and found that mountain rescue was a way to kind of blend passion of medicine and wilderness medicine with my love of the outdoors. So I've joined in 1999, long time ago.
And kind of jumping into your book a little bit, you talked a lot about the history of the Crag Rats and the mission, but tell us a bit more about what you get into in that book.
Well, I was going to write a straight history book, like 100 years of Crag Rats, and people were much smarter than me in the book world, like my awesome agent and my editor basically said, there's got to be more depth to the story. So it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of three stories in one. There's the 100-year history of the Crag Rats. There's a fair bit of recounting of modern-day rescues. And then there's this third issue, which was very challenging to write about, is the changes that have occurred on Mount Hood, the climate and topographic and geographic changes that I've seen in a short amount of time, in 25 years, but that the other Crag Rats have seen things change. So that's kind of how I put the book together.
Do you have any sort of main takeaways from the book? I'm really curious about that last bit you said. Do you have any sort of big things you can share about what you learned?
Yeah, so I think one of the largest takeaways for me, which I think some of my friends who read the book kind of picked up on this, but the main takeaway I think for me is that the Crag Rats have this deep passion, some would call addiction, for outdoor adventure, and our home is in the Alpine in Mount Hood, but the changes that we see firsthand on Mount Hood, those changes that make it maybe more difficult for us to rescue people, or maybe make it easier for people to get in trouble, are really just sort of a sign of things that are happening all over the world, in the wild places in the world.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of some of these changes that you're talking
Well,
about?
sort of the one that's I discuss in my book is the changing glaciers on Mount Hood. There used to be 12 glaciers on Mount
Mm.
Hood. Now there's 10. And even in the 25 years I've been a Crag Rat, the approach up the Elliott Glacier to get to the north side has changed significantly. There's more of the creek showing. There's more rocks on the glacier. The glacier's has melted significantly, and so even getting up to the climbing routes is more challenging than it used to be, where you could just zip up snow on skis. We now have to cross the Elliott Creek and scramble on rocks, and then navigate the glacier.
And with all of the changing landscape, you mentioned that there was a point where the number of rescues went up from like 5 to 30. Do you have an estimate of around how many rescues you're doing annually, maybe in
Yeah, so
2025?
I mentioned, we were plugging along for 5 or 6 decades at about 8 missions a year, and then in 2013 we jumped to 30 missions a year, and then it steadily went up. So in 2022, kind of the beginning of the post-pandemic outdoor recreation surge, we had 60 days of rescues, and in 2025 we had 54 days of rescues, and that's all done by about 35 people.
Wow. Wow. And when I think about that initial surge in rescues back in 2013, my first thought is like, okay, well, that's like around when Instagram was coming out. You have like a lot of millennials coming of age, and that's like a generation who likes to be outside more. Like, I don't know. Do you have like any thoughts or theories as to why these numbers jumped up so dramatically around that time?
Yeah, I think it's two reasons mainly. One is because there's just more people in the world, right? So, you know,
Hmm.
40 years ago there was 4 billion people in the world. Now there's 8 billion people. So there's just more people. And the other thing is there's more people accessing the mountains and the forests and the trails, which is great. Like, I think, speaking for most Crag Rats, we love it when people are outside enjoying and appreciating the wilderness. But um, equipment has made access easier, especially ski and climbing equipment, and even trail running and trail hiking equipment is just better, so people can go farther and get deeper and potentially get into more trouble.
And a lot of these rescues you've talked about are spanning a lot of different areas and places and parts of the landscape. Do you have any maybe memorable rescue missions that have stood out to you over the past, 26 years that you've been doing this?
Well, the most challenging missions tend to be memorable. The ones in the Alpine, high on the mountain, above 9 or 10,000 feet, are always, always, always difficult. But when I reflect back on the missions that are most memorable, they often occur in the middle of the night with all my best friends. We're able to have a lot of laughs, and we're able to bring somebody home successfully, uninjured or minimally injured, and there's a good outcome. And that camaraderie and the reward, even if it happens in the middle of the night, is the one. Those are the ones that stick out in my mind the most.
Yeah, it seems like that's a big part of this. I mean, the traditions you mentioned are, I'm sure, a part of that sort of team building, community building. I mean, how would you describe the Crag Rats as a community?
That's a good question. I think it's very difficult to become a member, and the reason is we really need a couple things One is we need people who are alpinists. Like, you don't have to be a professional or an expert alpinist, but you have to know your way around the mountains on skis and on crampons. But we're also looking for something which is very difficult, is somebody who fits in with our group, with a personality who fits in with our group. Because when we perform high stakes missions in the alpine in the middle of the night, in the middle of the storm, we have to be able to count on each other, and we have to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we have to be able to tell each other, hey, you need to change what you're doing. And that personality match is probably the most challenging.
Makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you've been able to create an organization that people really stick to, if you being there for so long is any indication. So are there a lot of people that have been a part of this organization for like 20, 30 years?
Yeah, our current oldest member is 94, and I think been a member for 70 years. And our member who just passed away last year at age 96 or 97 had been a member for like 75 years. So
wow.
Yeah, people join the Crag Rats and pretty much never leave.
Wow, that's great. I feel like, getting to a big milestone like this, 100 years, is sort of like often a good turning of the page moment. I wonder, have you all been thinking about like the future more, and what do you think the future of the Crag Rats looks like moving forward?
Well, I've thought about this quite a bit. We haven't really thought about this as a group, and I think it's because our group we're so busy doing things like, as I mentioned, 54 days of missions last year. We had another 30 or 35 days of training because we have to keep up on all of our, high-tech skills. And then we have another probably 20 people who have to run the club and make sure we get our insurance and make sure the vehicles are stocked. And so we're pretty busy. But I think one of the challenges that we're going to face in the future, well, two challenges, or one are just more people in the mountains. We're going to have to continue to adapt, and then we're also going to. It's a fair bit of work to keep up with technology, cell phone technology, drone technology. Mostly telecommunications technology.
Yeah. Well, Christopher, this is all super interesting, and I'm so glad that you came out here to talk to us today. One question I did have, I do have to ask about the name. Crag Rats is pretty. It sounds like a great like heavy metal band. You know what I mean? Like, what could you tell us about where did that name come from? Do you have any information about that?
Yes, I do, and I write about this a bit in my book. Back in 1926, in August, they formed this mountain rescue group, and they tossed around a couple different names. But immediately after forming, without a name, the group got pinged for a rescue on the south side of Mount Hood, and it was a multi-day mission where the group of Hood River mountaineers found a lost boy and brought him out of the mountains. And it was a 3-day mission, so there's a lot of press down in government camp, and somebody said, who are you guys? And the name came from somebody recalling one of the wives of the members saying, you guys are just a bunch of rats because you're climbing crags every weekend instead of doing household chores. So the member at a mission said, we're Crag Rats, and that name stuck for 100 years.
Wow.
It's a great one to hold on to.
It's really good. It's so good. Wow. Well, Christopher, hey, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on and talking to us about it today. Before I let you go, where can people find your book?
Well, they can find my book anywhere books are sold, online. Powell's has it. If they want a signed copy, Wacoma Bookstore in Hood River has signed copies.
Awesome. Well, hey, congratulations on 100 years and on the new book, and thanks again for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me here.
All right, folks, well, that will do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as hereisoregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show, and if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find the details at OregonLive.com/subscribe. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show is produced by me alongside Jamie Hale, Teresa Mahoney, and Vicky Connor.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds of Zen.